What is collaborative divorce, Alan?
Well, essentially, collaborative divorce is a way to help divorcing couples divorce amicably with fairness and respect. You know, it's been around a while now. It's been around really since about 1980. A gentleman named Stu Webb, who was an attorney, decided that he saw his practice wasn't really doing what he wanted to do. He saw that the couples were still fighting. The structure was emotionally detrimental, certainly financially detrimental, and he himself was feeling angst and anxiety from the whole process. So he wrote to a judge saying, look, I have this idea about trying to help people divorce amicably with fairness and respect, and I'm going to term it collaborative divorce. To his astonishment, other attorneys and other professionals were feeling the same way. And so now it's really become something that has been taking hold throughout the country and internationally as well since that time. And it's involved with numerous professionals, numerous types of professionals, namely attorneys, mental health professionals, and financial professionals, because those are the three key areas of any divorce.
How does it work? What are the mechanics behind it, or the process?
Well, a lot of it stems from good communication with the clients. That's really the criteria. They have to realize that they're always going to have a relationship even after the divorce, especially if children are involved. So if that's the case, why go through a structured system that creates animosity and anxiety when in fact you can divorce amicably, really split things equitably, and then move on with your lives and still have good post-divorce communication? The way that we do that essentially is get the couple together and have the professionals guide them through the process, both legally, emotionally, and financially, by having the professionals involved with the couple throughout the whole process.
And how does collaborative divorce differ from mediation? Because we talked about mediation in one of our previous sessions, and is it the same thing, or is it slightly different? How does that work? Walk us through that.
Mediation is a different process that can also be very beneficial when it comes to divorcing clients. But in the collaborative process, each client typically has their own legal representation. So each client will have their own attorney to deal with the legal aspects of the divorce. The interesting part about that, though, is that while the attorneys are representing their clients, they also understand the ramifications of the other client and really want to work together to make it happen effectively. Typically, when people go through a collaborative divorce, there are more assets involved. They've been married longer. Maybe there's children. Maybe there's some other complications within the process. So it's a little bit more involved than what a mediation divorce would probably entail. Typically, with a mediation, you'll have one mediator. They are not allowed to give legal advice when acting as the mediator in the divorce process, but they can structure the divorce, help structure the divorce, and actually write up the marital settlement agreement when the divorce occurs. Typically, with a mediated divorce settlement, the assets aren't nearly as much. Maybe they don't have kids. Maybe they haven't been married as long. So it's not as complicated a process. They may or may not bring on a financial professional. They may do it themselves again if the financial issues aren't that challenging or that difficult. And a mental health professional typically doesn't happen, isn't called in really in a mediated case unless there are some severe concerns with the clients on a mental health basis. Personally, with collaborative divorce, I think that it's really important to have the full team approach because, in my opinion, there are always mental health and emotional issues with any divorce. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, I think that a divorce typically is probably 60% emotional, 20% financial, and 20% legal, as opposed to any other way around.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why we had on one of our sessions talking about having the right mindset as you go through a divorce, that you have to treat it like a business transaction. I've been harping about that throughout our video sessions. Well, let me ask you this, Alan. What's the downside of collaborative divorce? Can you elaborate on that, and when would someone not use that?
Well, personally, I don't know if there really is a specific downside. I know there are times where it's not as beneficial, and you need to go through litigation, unfortunately. But they're few and far between, in my opinion. Collaborative divorce, I think, is really the only win-win situation out there for everybody that wants to and needs to go through a divorce. Now, certainly one of the problems is finding the couples that want to maintain good communication through the process. They have to be able to do that. They have to still be able to speak with one another for their own benefit. A lot of it has to do with good communication, and we as professionals help provide that to the couple, but they have to get past the revenge and the angst and the anxieties that would not enable them to talk to each other. That's really the only downside. Sometimes people think it can be expensive, but depending upon how it's structured and the assets that we're dealing with, it's actually less expensive, certainly, than going through litigation.
Oh, absolutely. What about time, though? Does a client really have control of their schedule? I mean, it seems to me that when you have all these professionals involved, that everyone has to get their calendars out and be able to meet and get the job done. It seems to me that it might take a little bit longer than what the client may anticipate. What's a typical case? How long does that usually run?
It depending upon the complexity of the individual case, it could take anywhere from, let's say, 3 months from start to finish to 2 years, depending upon, again, what's involved. As far as time goes, the funny thing is, with the collaborative process, the professionals are all there at once.
Right.
So we all get a chance to look at our calendars and actually plan the next session with the clients right there in front of us. So, and sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes we have to go back and check our schedules. But believe it or not, it's actually very, very efficient, much more efficient than if you have to plan a meeting with, let's say, an attorney who doesn't know what the court system's schedule is and has to be made available, at the spur of the moment because they have to run and do a court case. We
Right.
don't have that because we don't go to court. We don't have to deal with the structure of the court system. We're keeping everything out of court in collaborative practice, which is, one of the best and primary reasons why people would go to collaborative practice.
How many meetings are there normally in the collaborative divorce process between, let's say, the professionals and the clients?
Well, again, depending upon the complexity, and when I say the complexity, I mean the complexity of the asset structure.
Right.
If they have children, how long they've been married, what other relationships have occurred within the marriage itself. It could take 3 sessions total. It could take 13, 14 sessions.
Right.
We don't know until we're actually involved in the process, and that's what to me makes it so fascinating, so interesting, and because we tailor it to the individual. There's no one set, like Chinese food, buy from column A and then buy from column B.
Right.
It's all tailored individually to what the client's needs are.
Gotcha. Okay, great.
Although I like Chinese food.
So do I. What's the main benefit of going through the collaborative process?
Well, certainly there's a benefit financially for people. It will cost less, and statistically, we see that it costs typically about 30 to 50% less than going through a litigation, and certainly going to court.
Right, that's significant.
That's incredibly significant because ultimately you want to keep the assets that you've worked for all of your life. You want to keep the money, especially because of an economy like we currently have. You never know what's coming down the pike, so the money's better off in your pocket than anybody else's.
And it seems to me, because you have, let's say, a certified divorce financial analyst as the neutral, as the financial professional who is creating a divorce financial blueprint, as I call it, that probably this is going to move along a lot faster, and the certified divorce financial analyst is going to analyze all the tax aspects of the divorce and can do what-if scenarios and help both sides see the money so nothing's left on the table. And so that, for example, if the husband says, okay, I'm going to give you some alimony if that's on the table, and child support, maybe they can skew more towards alimony to get the tax deduction, for example. And there may be cost basis issues that if they went through the normal process or didn't do collaborative, that perhaps the husband ends up getting all the assets that have a low cost basis and gets nailed on taxes in the future. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like the collaborative process is going to look at all of those issues.
Well, yeah, I mean, bringing in a certified divorce financial analyst in any process, collaborative or not, I think would be advantageous because while attorneys are good at the legal aspect, they may not necessarily know all of the financial ramifications that have to occur, especially the tax issues that we as CDFAs, you included, understand and certainly appreciate and can help guide the clients effectively. Certainly the financial aspect of going through a collaborative divorce is highly beneficial. But again, there's also time factor. It takes less time to go through a collaborative divorce because, as I mentioned before, we're not incumbent upon the court's schedule.
Right.
We can plan things effectively, and typically, before you even get in front of a judge, at least in Brevard County right now, it's about 18 months to 2 years before you could actually see a judge to deal with the divorce issues.
It's funny you mentioned that. I ran into a judge here in our county, Seminole County, Florida, and she's a family law judge, and I said, how many cases do you have on your docket right now? And believe it or not, she said 6,500 cases. And part of the problem is these family law judges all of a sudden have to do foreclosures because of what's going on in the real estate market. So to get in front of a judge, it could take forever. Collaborative divorce process isn't for everybody. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
When is it where someone should take a pass on that?
Well, there are a couple of reasons why you can't or shouldn't go through a collaborative divorce. One of them is if there are severe mental issues involved, because you can't really focus on what needs to be done, and you really may need some therapy. And sometimes even with therapy, you can then re-enter the collaborative process. I know one of my first cases, we had a client who the mental health therapist picked out immediately as having some severe incapacity, and we had to stop the process and let them deal with that before we can re-enter it again. So that's something that has to be a concern. It doesn't necessarily prevent you from having a collaborative divorce, but certainly it has to be dealt with beforehand because you're not going to be able to focus. A collaborative divorce is still a highly emotional process, as all of them are, but at least we have the professionals there to help guide you, whereas opposed to a litigation divorce, you're not going to get really the emotional concerns from your attorney. That's not going to happen. So that would be one area if you have severe mental challenges. Another area is if there's fear, from one side to another. If there's been abuse, for instance, in the marriage, then it's very, very difficult to have good conversations with the client without the fear of them being there. And we try to make an level playing field with collaborative divorce. But sometimes, again, if the differences are so bad, if they're that fearful, then maybe, and there's so much mistrust or distrust in the process, then litigation may be the only way, and court may be the only way to force somebody's hand to behaving effectively.